The former President Uhuru Kenyatta is in big trouble after Oburu Oginga made this bold step immediately after the ouster of Edwin Sifuna. Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where we give you news updates as they break, and kindly if you are new here, consider subscribing. Now, the former President Uhuru Kenyatta is now in big trouble after the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, the Kenya's largest opposition party, has announced plans to formally leave the Azimio la Umoja coalition, citing what it called unilateral decisions and interference by coalition leaders. The declaration made during the National Executive Committee meeting in Mombasa marks the most serious rupture yet within the alliance that challenged President William Ruto in the 2022 general election. ODM leaders say that the party had effectively withdrawn from Azimio long ago and now intends to complete the process officially, a move that could reshape the country's opposition politics. Speaking at the meeting, ODM leader Uhuru Oginga said that the coalition could not function without the participation and consent of ODM, which he described as Azimio's strongest and most influential member. He argued that recent changes announced by Azimio chairperson and the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, including leadership appointments, were made without consulting ODM and therefore lacked legitimacy. According to Odinga, such actions undermine the principles of which the coalition was formed. The immediate trigger for the dispute was the appointment of the Wiper party leader Kalonzo Musyoka as Azimio's party leader. The ODM officials say that the decision was announced without prior consultation, violating coalition agreements that required consensus among major partners. Other changes, including replacement of Junet Mohammed as Secretary General with the Suba South MP Karoli Omondi, and the appointment of Phil Pukisia as Organizing Secretary following resignation of Raphael Tuju, further fueled the party's anger. Oburu Oginga dismissed these changes as invalid, insisting that no resolution could stand without ODM's agreement. He said that party had already distanced itself from Azimio's operations and that the planned exit was merely a formal acknowledgement of an existing reality. In strong language, he described the coalition as moribund, suggesting it had lost its political purpose and internal cohesion. The announcement places Azimio at crossroads, formed as a broad alliance to oppose the then ruling Kenya Kwanza coalition. Azimio brought together several parties under the leadership of Raila Odinga, with Uhuru Kenyatta playing a central coordinating role after leaving office. The coalition aimed to present a united front in elections and to act as a strong opposition bloc in parliament, and ODM's possible departure now threatens that unity and raises questions about Azimio's future relevance. The dispute also reflects deeper tensions over power and decision-making within opposition politics. ODM leaders argue that the party's electoral strength and not national reach give it a central role that cannot be ignored. In the 2022 election, ODM provided much of Azimio grassroots support and parliamentary presence, and from this perspective, the decisions taken without ODM's consent are seen not just as procedural errors, but as a political sidelining. Supporters of the recent changes, however, argue that Azimio needs clearer leadership and stronger structures to remain effective. They say that the coalition has struggled to define its role after losing the election, and the internal disagreements have weakened its ability to challenge the government. The appointment of Kalonzo Musyoka, a long-time opposition figure, was presented as a step towards stability and renewed focus. Beyond the coalition dispute, Oburu Oginga also used the NEC meeting to address internal discipline within ODM. He criticized the party officials and elected leaders who have publicly taken positions contrary to the party resolutions. Among those mentioned were ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, Embakasi East MP Babu Wino, Siaya Senator James Orengo, and other figures associated with the Linda Mwananchi movement, which has voiced a strong criticism of both the government and opposition leadership. Oburu won the public disagreements with the party decisions, weakened ODM's negotiating position and the confusion, or rather confused supporters. While acknowledging the party's democratic culture, he stressed the need for unity and collective responsibility, especially at the time when the opposition is under pressure to redefine itself. And his remarks suggest that ODM is not only reassessing its alliance but also tightening internal control to present a clearer political message. The growing rift highlights the broader challenges facing Kenya's opposition since the 2022 election, after the closely contested race and disputed result upheld by the Supreme Court. Opposition parties struggled to maintain momentum, and public protests over the cost of living and governance issues have drawn attention, but they have also exposed divisions over strategy, leadership, and engagement with the government. Azimio's difficulties are partly rooted in its diverse composition. The coalition brought together parties with different regional bases, priorities, and leadership styles. While this diversity was an asset during the campaign, it has become a source of tension in opposition. Without the unifying goal of winning an election, disagreements of authority and direction have become harder to manage. Historically, Kenya coalitions have often faced similar challenges. Alliances formed before elections frequently weaken afterwards as parties reassess their interests. Past examples show that coalitions without strong institutional frameworks and a clear decision-making rules struggle to survive beyond the electoral cycle. Azimio's current crisis fits this pattern, raising questions about whether it can adopt or whether it will fragment into separate political paths. And for ODM, a formal exit from Azimio could open new strategic options. The party could choose to operate independently in parliament, negotiate issue-based alliances, or even seek new coalitions ahead of the future elections. And such a move would allow ODM to assert its identity more clearly, but it could also carry risks, including reduced collective bargaining power and the challenge of mobilizing national support alone. For the wider opposition, the implications are significant. A divided opposition may find it harder to hold the government accountable, influence legislation, and present credible alternative to voters. At the same time, a reorganization could lead to a clearer leadership and more focused messaging if parties realign around shared goals, rather than the broad fragile alliances. The coming weeks will be critical. If ODM completes its formal withdrawal, Azimio will need to decide whether to continue as a coalition, restructure its leadership, or accept a diminished role. The response from other member parties, including Wiper, will indicate whether they see Azimio as salvageable or whether they too are reconsidering their positions. In the end, the moment matters because it speaks to the health of Kenya's democratic opposition. Strong organized opposition parties are essential for accountability, policy debate, and political balance. The ODM Azimio split is not just an internal party matter, it is a test of whether Kenya's opposition can adapt to post-election realities without losing public trust, and how these leaders manage disagreement, reform structures, and engage citizens will shape the country's political landscape in the years ahead. And that is all for today from Kenya Lens Media. If you are new here, kindly consider subscribing as a way of supporting us and motivating us to bring you such contents from Kenya and beyond.